Welcome viewers. In this module, I'll be discussing about managing organizational change, various applications of contemporary issues in organizational theory. Learning objectives are managing change using action research model, steps in action research process. These are process models of change, organizational development strategies and techniques to manage the change process. Understand the techniques used by organizations to achieve its desired future state. So, how do we manage change? As we have earlier discussed about Levin's process of managing change with three steps: unfreezing, changing and freezing. Similarly, change can also be managed by various other strategies. One such strategy is action research model. In the action research, a strategy for generating and acquiring knowledge that managers can use to define an organization's desired future state. It is used to plan a change program that allows organizations to reach that state. So, what happens during organizational change? As the organization in the current status quo, well defined purpose or strategy with a structure, and the organization has a well defined strategy, structure, system, and people have been allocated responsibilities. So, when there is an external force which like changes in technology, changes in business environment, which causes the organization, which debilitates the performance of an organization. So, organization has to adopt strategies to manage change. And before that, it has to diagnose what exactly has happened with the organization, why the performance has declined, what are the reasons whether the strategy or the structure are aligned with the business environment or not. So, one such strategy is action research model of change, where it's a process model of change where the change agent is part of the change process to understand the various the problems which arises during the change process. The various steps in the action research model is diagnosing organization, determining the desired future state, and implementing action, evaluating the action, institutionalizing actions which have been proposed. So, these are various steps in the action research, the process model of change. What is diagnosing organizations? As I told you that every organization has a state of affairs or a status quo, because the strategy, structure, skill sets of people or the manager's actions all are aligned with the business environment, the technology and the processes are well placed. So, the organization is able to perform effectively. Any issue with the strategy or any issue in the external environment or a force, any internal or external factor can disturb the performance of an organization. So, therefore, there has to be the processes, the issues or the problems which are arising in the organization need to be diagnosed by the change agents. The organization hires internal external change agents to understand where the problem has come up, and this will assessing the organization's problems helps them to propose a strategy for future, determining the desired future state, like where the organization would be after 5 years, where it would be, in which market to perform or which market it will be operating. So, all these decisions are planned by the top management. So, determining the desired future state and then implementing the plan of action. So, to begin with, diagnosing the organization, that means it helps in recognizing the problems and need to solve the problems, the gap which is perceived between the actual performance and the desired performance. There is a complex set of process to distinguish the symptoms and causes. What has led to the real issue of performance decline, why the organization is not able to achieve desired state of affairs or its objectives as planned by the top management. So, all these issues can be only possible if we diagnose the problems. Information should be collected from all levels of the organization and outside stakeholders such as customers, suppliers. Customers can tell you why the project has failed, why the a product is not in demand and suppliers can also tell you where there has been a failure. So, all these issues can be diagnosed. Then next step talks about determining the desired future state. A difficult planning process includes deciding what the structure and strategy should be. Managers need to work out various alternative courses of actions that could move the organization to where they would like it to be. Then the third step talks about implementation of action plans. Identify the barriers or the impediments in the change process. Decide who will be responsible for making the change and controlling the change process. External change agents and internal change agents play a major role diagnosing the problems. External agents are those people who are outside consultants, like those who have expertise in understanding the problems of the management and who are experts in managing change. Internal change agents are those people or the managers from within the organization who are knowledgeable enough about the situation, who understand the situation from the ground zero level, who can be instrumental for bringing in change, knowledgeable about the situation to be changed. Then the fourth step talks about how the change can be implemented or implementing the action plan. Deciding which specific change strategy will be most effective, whether unfreezing or creating an awareness amongst the employees about why there is a need for change by conducting various workshops or town hall meetings to make them understand how the change is being implemented, and finally making the change permanent, which is called refreezing the change by having some kind of training or reward mechanisms, making them realize that change is very important by using various strategies to make change a permanent, to change the strategies in the organization. There are different ways through which implementation can happen. One is top down approach and bottom up approach. Change that is implemented by managers at a high level in the organization, by the top management, change can be implemented, and also change can be implemented from the initiatives of the employees who are working in the ground level. Bottom up change, change that is implemented by employees, those who are in the action level in the organization and gradually rises until it is felt throughout the organization. So, we will be discussing about various issues like quality circles, where the people who are working in various processes, they are instrumental behind implementing change. For example, that is bottom up change process or participative process of change, evaluating the action that has been taken and assessing the degree to which change have accomplished the desired objectives. The last step is institutionalizing action research must become a norm. So, change which has been instigated, the change which has been planned must be institutionalized, must become a norm of the organization. It is necessary at all levels of the management. Members at all levels must be rewarded for their effort. As we know that it is a tendency of an individual to revert back to the normalcy or to come back to its original position. So, action research or the change initiatives have started where employees can come back to their original position once there is no control mechanism. So, people would revert back to what they were doing earlier. So, in that case, we must understand that there has to be an initiative by the organization, make change an order, or institutionalizing the change process. Members at all levels must be rewarded, there must be incentives to be planned or some kind of training to be given, make change permanent. Members at all levels must be rewarded for their efforts to be part of the change process. When the problems of organizations have been diagnosed or the initiatives have been taken to correct the problems in order to make the organization functional or in order to improve the performance of an organization. So, we also need to look at various organizational development measures. What are these organizational development measures? With any change, development is part and parcel of any change process. So, a series of techniques and methods that managers can use in their action research program to increase the adaptability of their organization. As we have discussed earlier, institutionalizing action research. It is only possible when the change becomes a norm of the organization. So, there has to be an initiative by the organization or a series of techniques and methods which managers can use to make them adapt to the new norms or new standards or new status quo. So, that is called organizational development. Organizational development measures are interventions or strategies to improve the capability of the people or employees to develop the structure which once was not compatible or the existing status quo or the desired status quo, changing the technology or updating the technology so that the organization becomes more effective and efficient. Improving processes. So, this is used to describe the choice which is made by the change process. Organizational development measures or the strategies, or these are the intervention strategies to develop capabilities of human resources, to improve structure. How the structure, like the structure which was working well prior to the change process may or may not be very efficient for the new situation. The present demands technology which was earlier working for an organization, the technology which was deployed may not be efficient. So, we need to also think of a new technology and which is much in demand. Organizational processes also need to be updated. So, let us understand what are these strategies, implementation strategies. There has to be a clear change vision, articulate why change is necessary. So, it is responsibility of the management make employees understand why there is a need to adapt to change. There are various initiatives like meetings organized by the management with all the stakeholders of organization so that they understand that the change is not a monster coming their way, but change is something which is very important at this point of time. Link change to the strategy, performance and future readiness. Like for example, every organization is moving towards the industry 5.0 in order to be fast, efficient and responsive to customer demands. Earlier there was automation as proposed by industry 3.0, then there is need for data analysis, big data analysis in industry 4.0, and now there is cyber physical systems in place so that there is a real time decision making which is coming our way to improve. Smart and intelligent industries are much talked about in the corridors of the industry or the business organizations. As the industry is becoming intelligent and smarter, you also need to revisit your own strategy. Organizations need to revisit their strategy, need to improve their performance and make themselves future ready. So, what is this future readiness? You have to develop the capacity of manpower. You have to, like organizations need to re-educate or make employees unlearn the past and relearn or learn new things which are coming their way, learning new technology to catch up with the change process. So, which is linking change to strategy, performance and future readiness. Leadership alignment and sponsorship. Secure visible commitment from senior leaders. Any change initiative will not be possible unless and until there is a change leader or the senior leadership's commitment towards a change initiative. Define sponsor roles. Like, no one will understand the relevance of artificial intelligence or the industry 5.0 machine learning models unless and how it is applicable in the industry unless and until told by an idea champion or the champions of the change process. There has to be a role model who can foretell the story of why change is important, why industries need to be intelligent and smart in order to make them faster and efficient in decision making. So, the change process is possible because if you have a strategic leader, ensure consistent message across leadership level. So, in every leadership position, a consistent message should be sent. Ensure consistent messaging across leadership levels. So, every leader should understand the relevance of the new industry norms, about the intelligent decision making, real time decision making, and how to re-educate their employees so as to catch up with the new industry norms. Stakeholder analysis and engagement. Identify key stakeholders and assess their impact, influence, and what is the level of resistance. Understand the real reason why people have been resisting. Segment stakeholders as supporters, neutrals, or resistors. You need to identify who the stakeholders are who are in support of the change process, which segment of stakeholders have been neutral, and who has been resistant to the change process. So, the reason is, if you have supporters, you can bring them along to be part of the change process. Neutrals need to be further re-educated about why it is important to be active supporter of change process, and resistors need to be managed by making them understand the relevance of change. So, there are need to develop engagement strategies for each group so that the change is meaningful, change process will become peaceful. Communication strategy: communicate early, often, and be transparent. Use multiple channels. It's not just one way, like writing an email, which can make people understand that change is important, but management must adopt different strategies by organizing meetings with stakeholders, by having a town hall meeting where there is a face to face interaction with all these groups of stakeholders, whether they are supporters, neutrals, or resistors, so that management can respond to their queries, and till the time the resistors are pacified with their queries. Emails, videos, and by having, say, spokespersons speaking about the change process. So, it is not just one channel, but multiple channels through which management need to convince stakeholders about why change is important. Focus on what is changing, why it is changing, when and what it means to various stakeholders, as well as what is the relevance of change to the organization, and if the organization does not change, what would be the consequence. Then further, employee involvement and participation. Employee participation in design and implementation. If you have employees participation in design and implementation of change, there will be less resistance because they have voiced their concern, their participation is there, their consent is there in designing the change process. Create cross-functional change teams or pilot groups. The management must think of having a workshop where people from different disciplines come together, they work as a cross functional team, and they can also discuss their issues and the problems when the change is being implemented, what issues may emerge. So, this will help them to give a foresight about what can happen when change is being implemented, and a corrective measure can be taken. Encourage feedback to build ownership. So, feedback from various team members can be incorporated in the change initiative so that they can understand that their suggestions has been placed in the change process. Capability building and training. Identify the skill gaps created by the change, provide targeted training, coaching, and job aids, support learning in the flow of work. Quick wins and pilot programs need to be organized. Start with the pilots or phased implementation. Deliver visible short term wins to build the momentum of change. Publicize successes to reinforce belief in change. Change agents and champions network. Identify and train change champions across the organization. Use them to cascade messages and model new behavior. Act as a feedback loop between employees and leadership. Then system structure and policy alignment. Align HR processes, key performance indicators, rewards and processes with the change, remove structural or procedural barriers, embed change into performance management, managing resistance, acknowledge emotional reactions and concerns, use dialogues, not forces to implement change, address root causes, fear, skill gaps, and loss of control. Then, monitoring and feedback is also very important. Collect feedback through the surveys, pulse checks, and several other mechanisms. Adjust implementation based on insights, and reinforcement and institutionalization. Reinforce new behavior through recognition and rewards through incentives. Update standard operating procedures, job descriptions, and leadership expectations about how the work should be performed. Make change as a new normal. Organizational development techniques or strategies deal with resistance to change through education and communication, inform workers about the change and how they will be affected. Participation and empowerment involve workers in the change process. Facilitation, helping employees with the change through bargaining, negotiation, manipulation strategies like change the situation to secure acceptance by force, like force workers to accept change. There are other techniques to promote change like through counseling, help people understand how their perception of the situation may not be right, may learn how to manage their interactions with other people more effectively. There is also another proposition or another technique called sensitivity training, intense counseling in which group members aided by facilitator learn how others perceive them, and they may learn how to deal with more sensitivity with others. There is another technique called process consultation, which is also part of organizational development technique. A trained consultant works very closely with the manager on the job to help managers improve his or her interactions with other group members. Consultants acts as a sounding board. Team building measures are also another measure for organizational development. Is a technique that where the facilitator first observes the interaction of group members and then helps them become aware of ways to improve their work interaction. Intergroup training methods like uses team building to improve the joint activities of different functions or divisions. Organizational mirroring is a technique where facilitator helps two interdependent groups explore their perception of each other. That means they understand what the other group is perceiving in order to improve their interaction. So, it may happen that there are two groups which are always in conflict with each other, but they are never coming to a consensus, they are never coming resolving their issues. Organizational mirroring is a technique where a facilitator tries to bridge relations between the two groups which are in collision, always having some kind of issues or problems. Each group takes turn describing the other group, and then finally they try to understand the perception about the other group and overcome those perception issues and then work together. So, organizational development techniques are basically helping to resolve the issues or the problems which may arise in the organization at various levels, be it the group level issues or the individual level issues or the technology related issues where the people working with the technology are not able to adapt to the new technology. So, interventions will always help employees to improve their performance in the work when post change process. Total organizational interventions or organizational confrontation meetings brings together all managers of an organization to meet to confront the issue of whether organization is effectively meeting its goals. So, during the change process, every organization faces some kind of issues or the performance related problems. There are some product failures, crisis which arises because of known and unknown factors, and because of the pressures from external environment. Technology is updating very fast. Customers' interests are not being addressed. So there are issues or the problems which arises in the organization, and there is labor management issue because of which the organization's performance reduces or debilitates. So organizational confrontation meeting brings together all the managers of an organization to address or to confront the problem, the real monster or the issue of whether the organization is effectively meeting its goals or not. Giving a descriptive overview of what we have discussed so far, organizational change, as we understand that stability leads to inertia or resistance. Internal compatibility requires revolutionary change and a power control mechanism to change organizations. We will be further discussing each one of them in more detail. Innovation and change. Innovation represents change, but not all change initiatives are innovative. The innovative change breaks new grounds for organization and hence is more threatening and more likely to be resisted by the organizational members. Innovation typically takes one of the two forms, that is technological or administrative. Innovation is the adoption of ideas that are new to the adopting organization. There are two types, that is technological innovation and administrative innovation. Technological innovation comprises of the use of new tools, techniques, devices or systems. Administrative innovation is implementation of change in the organizational structure or its administrative processes. What is technological innovation? Technological innovation is what most of us usually think about when they think about innovative change. These innovations encompass the use of new tools, techniques, devices, systems to produce change in the products or services or the way these products are produced or services are being rendered. The introduction of modular workstation at IBM's facility in Austin at Texas, which allows IBM to build computers entirely with robots, is an example of technological innovation. On the other hand, administrative innovation is the implementation of change in an organization structure or its administrative processes. This would include change like the introduction of flexi-time work schedule or a matrix organizational design. Organization strategy sets the overall framework for the importance of innovation. Prospectors, for example, tend to foster more innovation. Reactors, in contrast, tend to be low innovators. But clearly, certain structures are better than others for stimulating innovation. Machine bureaucracy is least likely to stimulate or accept innovation. Of course, one would argue that because it tends to be associated with stable environment, bureaucracy is least in the need of innovation. Its value lies in the efficiency through standardization, not initiating new and novel ideas. Innovation is most likely to flourish in adhocracies and in simple structure. So, innovation is stimulated in adhocracies by its personnel who tend to be professionals. The lack of formalization and active involvement of low level employees in decision making. The key to innovation is the simple structure. However, it lies not in the structure but in its chief executive officer. The evidence indicates that personality, power, knowledge of the CEO differentiates those simple structures that innovate from those that do not. Essentially, CEOs in an innovative organization have personality styles that demonstrate confidence in their abilities to control the environment, have centralized power for maximum control, and possess considerable knowledge about changes taking place in the organization's environment. Giving a descriptive overview of organizational change to this point, most of our discussion on change has been inherently very optimistic. While we have been alluded to the fact that change is often resisted, there is always resistance associated with the change process. The change literature we have described can be criticized as being built on the rational assumption that are essentially naive. There is a small but growing set of organizational theorists or management theorists who propose that such assumptions they do not tangle or mesh with reality. This view proposes that stability, not change, characterizes most organizations. It states that stability characterizes most organizations. However, organizations do not make continual adjustments in response to change in their environment. When change comes, the critics argue it comes very fast and dramatically. And to summarize, the theme of the discussion is organizations are extremely stable over a period of time, and when the change is initiated, it is revolutionary rather than evolutionary change. Further leading the discussion, stability, how it is leading to resistance. Organizations, by the very nature, are very conservative. They actively resist change, and we do not have to look far to see evidence of this phenomena. Government agencies want to continue doing what they have been doing for years. People become complacent, whether the need for their services change or remains the same. Industries have also taken a lot of time to shift towards the new norms or towards the latest trends of industry, that is intelligent industries. Organized religions are deeply entrenched in their history. So government agencies want to continue what they have been doing for years, whether the need for their services changed or remains the same. The same is with industry. They have become almost complacent with automation and has taken a lot of time to transition to industry 4.0 and 5.0 revolution. It's slowly catching up. So the educational institutions which exist to open minds and challenge established doctrine are themselves extremely resistant to change. Educational institutes do not also update their curriculum very fast. They are not working in synchronous with the industry change or industrial revolutions like industry 4.0 and 5.0. So, the curriculum, if it does not change with the latest trends, we are not able to make our students ready for the new industries or the industrial demands. Stability leads to inertia. Most school systems are using the same technology today as they were having in the last couple of decades. Majority of business firms do appear highly resistant to change. So, why do organizations resist change? First, members have a fear losing what they have. They become complacent. It is because of their habit, they do not want to accept the new norms. Second, most organizations are highly bureaucratic. Such structures have built-in mechanisms that work against change process. Then further, many organizations can manage their environment and have buffered themselves against needing to change. And organizational culture also resists pressures toward change. So, to summarize the discussion here, it appears that planned organizational change gets a lot more attention in the literature, in the existing textbooks. So, people think that change is a planned process. The forces against change result in organizational inertia and far more stability than the rational change literature would predict. So, of course, inertia or resistance is not bad. Organizations need some resistance qualities, otherwise, they might respond to every pursued change in the environment. Every organization needs stability to function. We do not say that stability is not required. Stability is, of course, important to maintain continuity and order. And there is also some resistance required in order to reflect on why there is a need for change, if there is change required at all. Do we understand the environment and how others or the competitors have responded to the change process? So, if an organization reacted to every change stimulus, it would lose its consistency, its goal directed behavior that makes a group of people into an organization. So, therefore, of course, stability to some extent is important to maintain its continuity and order, and reflection on the need for change is also important, and to a large extent, there is a need to have resisting forces. So, internal compatibility requires revolutionary change. There is essentially a limited number of basic configurations. Additionally, we also have understood that these configurations have a common and consistent set of elements, and if you disturb the consistency by changing one of the design elements, like the various configurations of organizations, if we change the organization's design will become out of balance, like you have centralization, formalization, authority structures, and so all these will design elements will get disturbed at the extreme. If these elements were to change regularly in a piecemeal fashion, there would be too much variety among organizations to allow for a limited set of configurations. Then we need to know that all the organizations are not unique. They tend to develop internal consistencies between their technology, their authority structures or patterns, the span of control, degree of specialization, standardization, formalization, and other structural configurations or elements. This recognition that an organizational structural elements of authority patterns, span of control, centralization, specialization, standardization need to be consistent with internal compatibility as an important implication for organizational change. So, we have suggested that when organizations change, the change will be comprehensive. And let us also understand the means which is coupled with our previous discussion about stability. Management would prefer to avoid change if it were possible because of its cost, disruptive impacts, and threat to management control. If the organization faces a dynamic environment, we should expect that management will first try to reduce its dependency on that environment. But even the largest and the most powerful organizations cannot completely manage their environment. So, management's options are essentially to keep with the change in the business environment by changing itself incrementally to match changes in the environment. This will achieve environmental fit but create internal consistency. The other alternatives is to delay change until it is absolutely necessary. So, we should not change very fast, but we should understand the environment, understand the forces of change if other organizations have also adopted to change. So, there is always better to delay than to quickly follow the trend. It is absolutely unless and until it is absolutely necessary to make change. So, this maintains internal consistency, but at the price of having a poor environment structure fit for over a period. This choice between the two options might be a dilemma if it were not for management's preference for making few changes as possible and the reality that management does not seek to maximize effectiveness. So, if the choice were between change and no change, management would be expected to prefer the status quo, but that option is not available. If the choice between change and no change, management would be expected to prefer the status quo. Management is going to have to accept some changes in the order to maintain a satisfying level of organizational effectiveness. Internal compatibility requires revolutionary change. But when the choice is between continual change and the infrequent variety, the decision is very easy. They select the latter, and we can now state the descriptive view of organizational change. Organizations are characterized by long periods of resistance or inertia, punctuated by brief periods of dramatic and comprehensive change, which culminates in a very short period of time. Then there is a power control mechanism which speaks about dimension of power control footnote. How does the descriptive view of the organization change with the power control approach to organizational design? Power control advocates, they would agree with the notion of resistance and recognize that those in power have little reason to change the current structure. The status quo maintains control and further the interest of the power holders. The advocates of power control ignore any concern for maintaining internal consistency among structural elements, rather emphasize the lack of planning in planned change initiatives and argue that change more likely represents a loss of control by dominant power coalition than a response to the environment. And effectiveness is defined in terms of those doing the evaluation, rational assumption that change in structure will be implemented as needed to ensure high performance is unrealistic. The proponents of power control mechanism would argue that structural change would occur neither planned nor as a response to facilitate technical efficiency or demand of environment. Following brief summary about the power control mechanism, change is most likely as a response to pressing demands created by internal external parties interested in the organization. Change is reactive rather than anticipatory. In practice, planned change is typically a process of change which is followed by planning that legitimates and ratifies this change. As noted about the goals in the earlier discussions, meaning is attributed to an action, but usually after it has occurred. When change is made in response to the demands by powerful interest groups, it is packaged and sold in a more legitimate form. It is rationalized as being consistent with the goals of enhanced organizational effectiveness. Then pressures for change comes from anywhere outside the dominant coalition, and if those in the power are not able to keep those pressures in check, change will be implemented. It may not be what the dominant coalition wants, but at the time they will have lost control. When these changes are implemented in response to the outside pressure, they will tend to be conveyed as planned and consistent with organizational goals of improved performance. So, to conclude the discussion here, what we have learned during implementation of change, there is a process of implementing change where the change agent is part of the change process called action research model of change. Then we also learned the implementation tactics, or we have also understood how the change strategies are implemented in order to make change possible, or these are various issues of organizational development to improve the capacity of human resources, to change the structure, changing the technology or changing the work processes. So, there are different mechanisms also adopted. One is top down measure of change implementation, and bottom up or participatory nature of implementation of change. We have also learnt about organizational designs that fosters innovation. Finally, we conclude that why stability not change characterizes most organizations. Thank you.